It's going to be Tivada Chashya Prabhaki, Shima Prabhaki, that's for the Ki, Nam Chash, the Harvest Koki, Harvest Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Dvaita, Gadadhar, Sri Vasari Go, Bhaktivinoda Ki, Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath, Shamapur Radha, Shri Gopinath Ki, Shri Mathura Nam Dam Ki, Shri Mayapur Dam Ki, Shri Lila Chashya Guru Dam Ki, Guruvardhan Ki, Gandhamachi Ki, Bhakti Devatal Smaran Ki, Sri Haridam Sankirtan Ki, Sri Prabhupada's Transcendental Distribution Ki, Sri Prasad Distribution Ki, Haridam Guru Ki, ISKCON Guru Ki, Vaishnava Seva Vaishnava Sangha Ki, Samvit Bhakti Vrinda Ki, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the sweet Shri Guru. We love to speak of our spiritual aspect, and the only way by which we can take the devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet in great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. I only wish to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all his atoms. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, earth after earth. My ecstatic peregrinations and my ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor and the master of devotees. O Master, be merciful to us. Give us the shade of the waters to see. Your fame is spread throughout the three worlds. We take shelter at your lotus feet. His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki.
Our dear Lordships, please make us worthy of your mercy, so this coffee shop may flourish in numbers of happy devotees, in the blessings of Sri Lakshmi Devi, and especially in love for you who are devotees. Shri Yes, please.
Just about
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Bala Giri Varadari Jaya Gopi Jana Bala Giri Varadari Jaya Gopi Jana Bala Yashodanandana Raja Janaranja Yashodanandana Raja Janaranja Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Bala Giri Varadari 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 Yashodanandana Raja Janaranja Yashodanandana Raja Janaranja Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol,
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol,
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada,
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Vishnupada Mahamsa Parivadi Acharya Rastatana Shri Srimad Abhay Charavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki, His Swami Viti Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Jaya Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivadi Acharya Rastatana Shri Srimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki, Shri Anantapati Vaishnavinda Ki, Shri Guru Parambara Ki, Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki, Shri Rupa Shri Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath, Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Das Raghunath, Shri Shad Goswami Prabhu's Ki, Ramsikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Sarigaura Bhaktarinda Ki, Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath, Shyamakunda Radhakunda, Shri Guru Govardhan Ki, Shri Vrindavan Mathura Ki, Shri Madhvanagari Dham Ki, Shri Narachalajana Pridam Ki, Anurajamaya Ki, Bhakti Devi Tulsi Rani Ki, Shri Harinam Sankhan Ki, Shri Bhagavad's Transcendental Distribution Ki, Transcendental Prasadam Distribution Ki, Shri Shikodanataya Vaikushya Ki, Shri Tulsinath Maharaj Ki, Shri Giridhara Ki, Shri Nrsimhadev Bhagwan Ki, Srimati Vrindadevi Ki, Iskandar Vrinda Ki, Nitai Gaura Premanand. All glories to your seven devotees. All glories to your seven devotees. All glories to your seven devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Guru. We're still in the week, aren't we, of Shravan and Kirtan week. So are the classes extended a little long? So what time is the class finished?
It's supposed to be back next day.
Thank you. I'm going to read a little from Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita. Let there be a temple. It's describing Srila Prabhupada's establishing temple projects around the world from 1971 to 1975. And we're in New Vrindavan in West Virginia, USA, July the 18th, 1974. A letter from Karanda reached Srila Prabhupada informing him of his resignation as GBC for India. The responsibilities were too great for him. for he had only recently come back to Krishna consciousness. He would continue to follow the spiritual program, but he could not be the GBC. Again, Srila Prabhupada was set back, and before several GBC men in his room at New Vrindavan, he asked, "What to do? What shall we do? So maybe I should just give up these projects in India." But Srila Prabhupada, the devotees, replied, "Those India projects are very dear to you." "But what can be done?" Prabhupada asked. Except for Guru Das, none of the devotees in Vrindavan thought that the building would be ready by the scheduled grand opening. Work was going along slowly as usual, and except for the deity hall area, the land was still a construction site. There were no altars, no deities. Tejas thought Guru Das so feared displeasing Prabhupada that he could not bear to admit that the building would not be ready. The date had been set, and Prabhupada did not want excuses. "It has to be done by Janmashtami," he wrote. "There is no question of delay." Guru Das admitted that the temple construction wouldn't be completely finished by Janmashtami, but he reasoned that the opening ceremony could still take place, even if the final touches on the temple weren't done. Because there was no regular GBC secretary for India, Prabhupada did not receive accurate reports on the Vrindavan temple construction. When Tamal Krishna Goswami had left in April to preach in the West, several months had passed before Prabhupada had appointed a replacement, Karamdar. Now, after only a few weeks, Karamdar had resigned. Guru Das's version, therefore, was the only one Prabhupada had received. The end of July grew near, and devotees prepared to travel to Vrindavan for a fiasco. Vrindavan, August 4th, 1974. When Prabhupada's car pulled up at the ISKCON property at Ramanreti, a group of devotees greeted him with kirtan and flowers. Some 25 devotees from temples around the world had already gathered for the grand opening celebration, and along with the Vrindavan devotees, they crowded happily around Srila Prabhupada. No formal walkways had been constructed, and Prabhupada walked through the half-constructed walls, past piles of sand and bricks, making his way toward the deity house. Even here, the lack of ornamentation and finishing was apparent, and rubble lay all around. "What is this?" Prabhupada demanded as he toured the construction site. "There is nothing here. Where is the temple? You told me the temple was finished." Guru Das, Surabi Gunanava, and others directly responsible were unable to answer. Their faces went white. Prabhupada was furious. "How can you open this?" The visiting devotees also began speaking among themselves. "It's not ready, how can we open?" But Prabhupada said, "One devotee, devotees from all over the world are coming." "Stop them immediately," Prabhupada said. "There will be no opening." Prabhupada had burst the bubble, the illusion that they would be ready for the grand opening. Prabhupada's anger was frightening, and the devotees who surrounded him were no longer carefree and joyful. "You were going to open this temple?" Prabhupada scoffed. "The altar is ready," said Harikesh, who had come from Japan to attend the opening. "We can install the deity and..." "You cannot open this temple," Prabhupada shouted. "This temple is not completed." Prabhupada then walked into his house, followed by the Vrindavan managers and a few other leaders. Whoever could keep his distance from Prabhupada in this mood considered himself spared. Surabi's wife ran off to pray to Krishna, afraid of Prabhupada's ferocity. In his room, Prabhupada's anger only increased. He yelled at Guru Das for mismanagement. He yelled at Surabi. He yelled at all of them. No one dared to offer suggestions or excuses. There was nothing to do but turn white and become depressed. Prabhupada suddenly inquired whether the temple could be opened despite the mess. "Can you have the deity rooms ready at least?" He turned to Surabi. "This is an insult to our society. What will people think? We have announced it everywhere." "Nobody actually knows about it, Srila Prabhupada," Surabi replied fearfully, exposing himself for another blast. "Oh?" Prabhupada somewhat changed his tone. You have not made any propaganda about it, no invitations? Not yet, Prabhupada, not to the people in Vrindavan. They do not expect it to open because everyone who has been here can see that it is not possible to open. They know it's not ready. This is a farce, Prabhupada scowled. It is a fiasco. Disgusted, he looked at his Vrindavan managers. We have to open. How can we open on Janmashtami? Srila Prabhupada Sarabi said, the doors are not ready. They are still cutting the wood. Prabhupada inquired about the deities from Yamuna, who explained that their paraphernalia had been purchased, but the thrones were not ready. What is your opinion, he asked her. I am totally unqualified to speak, Yamuna said, and although I have no right to speak, I see it as almost impossible to actually open the temple. There is no pujari. With a sense of finality and failure, Prabhupada said, then we won't do it. But we've invited so many people from around the world to come, and I was not informed of this. Now you all decide. When can we open, Prabhupada asked? Can we open on Diwali? When is Diwali? October, Srila Prabhupada. How about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's appearance day, a devotee suggested. That's at the end of December. Prabhupada was silent, looking displeased. Sarabi spoke up. It will take 6 months, actually 7 months. Then Prabhupada chose the day of Ram Navami in April. The opening could coincide with the annual gathering of devotees in Mayapur and Vrindavan. Sarabi spoke again. He had grown pessimistic from his experiences with construction in India. It depends on whether we can get the cement, Srila Prabhupada, he said. We have to get it from the government. That was the main obstacle preventing us from opening now. We could possibly have the opening in 3 months if we could get cement. All right, Prabhupada said, resigned. There was no use trying to set a date. It will be done before next Janmashtami. His tone was sarcastic. And if the cement can be obtained, it can be done after 3 months. Later, while meeting with various individuals, Prabhupada continued to express his displeasure, especially to Guru Das. He asked questions but was dissatisfied with the answers. He asked Guru Das to bring the financial records, and then he reprimanded him more. Finding a receipt for Guru Das's stay in an expensive hotel in Jaipur, Prabhupada made an issue of it. Guru Das became aloof. When Prabhupada finished talking with him, Guru Das returned to his room, staying there unless Srila Prabhupada called for him. We'll stop there. Srila Prabhupada ki, Sri Vrindavan Dham ki, Shri Radha Shyama Sundar ki, Shri Krishna Balaram ki. Anyone who's been to Vrindavan, to the temple there, knows that all of that effort was worth it. Srila Prabhupada considered it to be the best temple in the whole of Vrindavan. He was very happy with it when it was finally finished. But if he hadn't been so strict with the devotees who were managing that project, then they would have been cheated by the builders and by the people who supplied the raw materials. So Srila Prabhupada was training his disciples to be expert managers of Krishna's facilities and Krishna's property, because he knew that the temple would be there for hundreds of years to come. So also Srila Prabhupada, as well as taking great pains to ensure that all of the temples that he opened were built to the highest standard, and he also took great pains to see that his books were printed to the highest standard. And so I've brought some of Srila Prabhupada's books. into the temple room today. And especially this book. It may not look like it's at the highest standard, but it's now, this book is actually 50 years old this year. So it's the 50th anniversary of the publication of the first volume of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And these books were printed in Japan, as far as I can, printed by Dai Nippon Printing Company in Japan. So anyone who's been listening to these Srimad Bhagavatam classes in the last few months would have heard of Srila Prabhupada's visit to Japan to meet the managers and directors of the Dai Nippon Publishing Company, because he wanted the best quality printing. So he'd researched the different publishers all over the world and decided that in Japan they have the best printing, the best quality binding, and he also understood that the Japanese business people were very trustworthy in one sense. They were very concerned about their reputation. So Srila Prabhupada got a really good deal on these beautiful books, which are actually huge, and they've all got very beautiful colored plates and very wonderful printing. And even though this book's been read for 50 years, then the binding is still in good condition. And also, as you can see, you can put it down flat without the pages springing over. So Srila Prabhupada definitely did his homework, and he was so enthusiastic about these books being printed that when he received the first advanced copies, he was giving a public lecture. I don't remember. I tried to find out where that lecture was today, but I didn't have time to find out. Does anyone remember where he was speaking when he received the first copies of the Krishna book? I think it was in Canada, but anyway, I may be wrong. Anyway, it was a public engagement, some kind of festival. It may have even been a Rath Yatra, but it was some big festival. And there was lots of members of the public there, as well as devotees. And one devotee rushed to Srila Prabhupada and told him that the first copies, the advanced copies of this Krishna book, first volume, had come hot from the press. So Srila Prabhupada received them, and he looked through them, and they were just so beautiful. He was very, very happy with the printing and with the color plates. And so he actually distributed them all on that day to the members of the public and people who come to the festival. So all of these books were distributed on that day in a public festival. Anyway, this one's not one of those. This is one of the, I don't think it is, but this is might be from the next printing, which would have just been a few weeks later. Although actually, that's interesting, because the address in here says Radha Krishna Temple, 67 Gribblehurst Road, Mount Albert. I don't know where that is. Maybe in Canada, maybe in America or South Africa. So I just told that story because it's today the class is about reading Srila Prabhupada's books and distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. So in that pastime, Srila Prabhupada was displaying by his own example how by reading these books we develop an unstoppable urge to distribute the books, because we appreciate how potent they are, how beautiful they are, and we also understand how much energy and time and studied Srila Prabhupada put into writing the books. So therefore we have faith that whoever receives them will be greatly benefited. So I'm going to read a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam which talks about how, in one sense, how the books are empowered, or how book distributors are empowered, how the process of book distribution is an empowering activity. And this is from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, which is the verse? Right. Okay. I think I've got the wrong volume with me.
Which one do you want?
I mean, this is, I've got Canto 4, Volume 2, but I think I need Volume 1.
I didn't get it on the tablet.
Okay, yes, please.
No.
Oh, wait a minute, I think you.
This is 4:12:51.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Just waiting.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting for this, sorry I brought the wrong volume of Bhagavatam with me. I also want to talk about this book, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which was one of the first books that Srila Prabhupada had printed. This was printed before the Chaitanya Charitamrita was completed. It was first printed in 1974. And I first saw a copy of this book in Newcastle Central Library in 1987, and it wasn't actually didn't actually belong to the library, but a devotee had just put it in the philosophy section in the library, along with an invitation to the temple inside, and it was printed in very large numbers and distributed in the UK. It was a very popular book for distribution. And it's interesting, this morning just before our japa period every morning, we read a quote to inspire us in our japa. And this morning we read a quote from this book. And the quote was referring to how one can't approach Krishna through mundane logic and mundane scholarship. And actually Srila Prabhupada, when he was writing this book, and also when he was writing the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Bhagavad Gita, in fact all of his books, he knew that scholars would read them because he asked his disciples to travel and to find libraries, university libraries and other libraries where the books could be placed. And eventually a library team developed. So certain senior disciples of Srila Prabhupada, including Bhakti-tirtha Maharaj, Harikesh Maharaj, they traveled extensively in North America and Europe, and many universities took complete sets of Srila Prabhupada's books. And Srila Prabhupada started receiving reviews from many of the professors who were reading these books, and he would always include those reviews. He would ask his disciples, when they were publishing new editions of the Bhagavatam and new editions of the Bhagavad Gita, to include these reviews in the beginning of the book, so that when other persons who were scholarly saw those reviews, then they would be encouraged to read them. And but it's very interesting, in this book, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which contains some of the most esoteric philosophy of the Vaishnav tradition, conversations between Lord Chaitanya and Ramananda Roy, between Lord Chaitanya and Prakashananda Saraswati. It's very, it really requires a lot of study to really understand these conversations. So Srila Prabhupada was looking forward. Srila Prabhupada was excited about the prospect of scholars and logicians reading these conversations in the hope that they would give up their atheistic tendencies, and the hope that they would begin to respect Krishna consciousness as a bona fide tradition, or has been connected to a bona fide sampradaya. But as well as that, Srila Prabhupada also wanted anyone who read his books to get a very good dose of Krishna bhakti. And it's really interesting that in the chapter called Conversations with Prakashananda, which of all of the chapters in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya is the one that most points out the defects of a logical, just an exclusively materialistic attempt to understand Vedanta just through logic and scholarship. So in this chapter, Srila Prabhupada, whenever he has the opportunity to mention that Lord Chaitanya preached the chanting of the holy names of Krishna, whenever that came up in the original text, Srila Prabhupada had the whole Maha Mantra printed. So in this chapter, which is only about 10 pages long, the Maha Mantra in its entirety is printed 15 times. And on the last 3 pages, it's actually printed 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, 9 times on the last 3 pages. So this is like Srila Prabhupada's enthusiasm for having his books distributed. That here the people who are least likely to accept that the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The scholars and the Sanskrit professors and the students of Vedanta, amongst everybody reading Srila Prabhupada's books, and these were probably the least likely people to accept that the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is the conclusion of all of the Vedas. But in that very chapter, which in one sense is most applicable for them to study, Srila Prabhupada is like, he's hitting them with the Maha Mantra, that it's like he knows that they're going to be interested in the subject matter, and therefore he's making sure that they get a really good hit with the Maha Mantra. They're not likely perhaps to join in the Harinam, and probably the kind of people who are never going to be out on the high street anyway. They're just drive from their homes to their university offices. They're not really likely to attend a Hare Krishna festival at the student union. So Srila Prabhupada's really like hitting them with the Maha Mantra. Srila Prabhupada did get a lot of very good reviews from Sanskrit professors who basically said that he was perfectly presenting the Chaitanya, the Chaitanyite version, or he was perfectly representing the sampradaya that comes from the Rupa Goswami and from Lord Chaitanya. So those scholars who actually had already had some previous knowledge of Vaishnava philosophy, they understood that Srila Prabhupada was like the preeminent scholar of Vaishnava philosophy. And therefore their reviews, in one sense, allowed a non-prejudiced audience to be enthusiastic about reading. So we're going to read this verse now. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I'll just read it myself. Jnanam Agyata Tatvaya Yodadyat Satvate Mritam Kripalo Dinanatasya Devastasya Nagrinate. Jnanam Agyata Tatvaya Yodadyat Satvate Mritam Kripalo Dinanatasya Devastasya Nagrinate. Jnanam Agyata Tatvaya Yodadyat Satvate Mritam Kripalo Dinanatasya Devastasya Nagrinate. Please repeat. Jnanam, knowledge. Agyata Tatvaya, to those who are unaware of the truth. Ya, one who. Dadyat, Dadyat, imparts. Satpate, on the path of truth. Amritam, immortality. Kripalo, kind. Dinanatasya, protector of the poor. Deva, the demigods. Tasya, to him. Anagrinate, give blessings. Translation. The narration of Dhruva Maharaj's sublime knowledge for the attainment of immortality. Persons unaware of the absolute truth can be led to the path of truth. Those who are out of transcendental kindness, those who out of transcendental kindness take on the responsibility of becoming master protectors of the poor living entities automatically gain the interest and blessings of the demigods. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada. Jnanam Agyata means knowledge which is unknown almost throughout the entire world. No one knows actually what is the absolute truth. Materialists are very proud of their advancement in education, in philosophical speculation, and in scientific knowledge, but no one actually knows what the absolute truth is. The great sage Maitreya therefore recommends that to enlighten people about the absolute truth, tattva, devotees should preach the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the entire world. Srila Vyasadeva especially compiled this great literature of scientific knowledge because people are completely unaware of the absolute truth. In the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, it is said that Vyasadeva, the learned sage, compiled this great Bhagavad Purana just to stop the ignorance of the mass of people. Because people do not know the absolute truth, this Srimad Bhagavatam was specifically compiled by Vyasadeva under the instruction of Narada. Generally, even though people are interested in understanding the truth, they take to speculation and reach at most the conception of impersonal Brahman. But very few men actually know the personality of Godhead. Recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam is specifically meant to enlighten people about the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although there is no fundamental difference between impersonal Brahman, localized Paramatma, and the Supreme Person, factual immortality cannot be obtained unless and until one attains the stage of associating with the Supreme Person. Devotional service, which leads to the association of the Supreme Lord, is actually immortality. Pure devotees, out of compassion for the fallen souls, are kripalu, very kind to people in general. They distribute this Bhagavad knowledge all over the world. A kind-hearted devotee is called Dinanath, protector of the poor, ignorance protector of the poor, ignorant mass of people. Lord Krishna is also known as Dinanath or Dinabandhu, the master or actual friend of the poor living entities. And his pure devotee also takes the same position of Dinanath. The Dinanaths, or devotees of Lord Krishna, who preach the path of devotional service, become the favorites of the demigods. Generally, people are interested in worshipping the demigods, especially Lord Shiva, in order to obtain material benefits, but a pure devotee who engages in preaching the principles of devotional service as prescribed in the Srimad Bhagavatam does not need to separately worship the demigods. The demigods are automatically pleased with him and offer all the blessings within their capacity. As by watering the root of a tree, the leaves and branches are automatically watered, so by executing pure devotional service to the Lord, the branches, twigs, and leaves of the Lord, known as demigods, are automatically pleased with the devotee, and they offer all benedictions. Om Jnana Shakaya Chakshtamaitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manodishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayamukadamayam Jati Swavadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Taparikamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagachatam Sahaganam Varganatam Tam Tam Sajivam Sarvaitam Savadutam Harijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Shakam Vitam Shah Anshakapatarubhishya Kristaviyavicha Paritaram Bhavanevyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha. So the reason I chose this verse was because it talks about it says that a pure devotee who engages in preaching the principles of devotional service as prescribed in the Srimad Bhagavatam does not need to separately worship the demigods. The demigods are automatically pleased with him and offer all the blessings within their capacity. So this sheds some light on how devotees engaged in preaching the message of Srimad Bhagavatam become empowered. Here Srila Prabhupada says that such devotees please the demigods, and the demigods offer all blessings within their capacity. So anyone who's been engaged in book distribution will know that amazing things happen. We used to describe them as being miraculous, but here we can have perhaps a little insight that the miracle is being partly facilitated by the blessings of the demigods. The demigods are able to understand past, present, and future to some degree, and are able to have some influence on the subtle intentions of people. And they're also able to bestow some of their other powers and their other abilities. And Srila Prabhupada himself, if you look at his life, undoubtedly he was a very well-educated and intelligent young man, a teenager, going to school in one of the best schools in India, the Scottish Churches College. And he he was also a free thinker as well. He didn't just go along with a materialistic life according to the way all of the other students saw it, but he was interested in politics. He was interested in Gandhi's movements. He was a deep thinking person, even at an early age. And then he also had the perception to appreciate Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's spiritual acumen when he met him for the first time. There was, at that time, Srila Prabhupada said he accepted Srila Bhaktisiddhanta as his spiritual master from that time when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta actually asked him to preach Krishna consciousness in the English language. But it seemed that Srila Prabhupada didn't actually really begin to receive the blessings of the demigods until he started mass book distribution, or at least really making inroads into the intellectual life of the generation in America and Europe in the late 60s and early 70s. And when he was always wanting to meet influential people, to be able to present Krishna consciousness to influential people. And if you read his the Leela Amrita, his biography by Satsvarup Das Goswami, and also many other biographies now written by his other early disciples like Shyama Sundara, Guru Das, Mukunda Goswami, Yamuna Devi Dasi, and you see how there really was a Hare Krishna explosion, and it was actually it was incredible. And not just Srila Prabhupada was, obviously empowered. Of course, Srila Prabhupada was empowered due to his complete purity and complete adherence to the order of his spiritual master. But many of his disciples were also very much empowered. And this verse which talks about pleasing the demigods, that the demigods are especially pleased when the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam are distributed. And so Srila Prabhupada also mentions in one purport in the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam that it's the duty of the devotees to think of novel ways to distribute this knowledge. And Srila Prabhupada was always thinking of novel ways. So here's another novel book that he conceived of. This was actually in 1961, before he came to the USA. He read, he wrote this book in Vrindavan in 1961 in response to an invitation to attend a world conference, the Congress for Cultivating the Human Spirit, held in Japan. So therefore he was thinking how could he best take advantage of this opportunity. You see that Srila Prabhupada was a greatly respected scholar in 1961. He had, he was so he somehow or other he received this invitation. And so he had the idea of translating a chapter from the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's actually the chapter called The Description of Autumn. And translating this chapter into prose, and then finding a Chinese or Oriental artist to illustrate the book and to have it displayed in this conference for cultivating the human spirit in Japan. So that was his, that was his enthusiasm for wanting to find ways to present the Srimad Bhagavatam in a way that would be applicable to the people of a particular part of the world. And as it happened, it didn't manifest. I don't know exactly why, but he didn't go to Japan at that time, and the book didn't appear wasn't displayed in the conference. But later, at a later time, the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust decided to to print the book, and they found a renowned Chinese artist called Madame Li Yun Sheng, and they asked her to provide illustrations. So it's a very, very wonderful book, actually. And this isn't the original edition, but it's got the original photographs in. And and I think it's especially attractive now, because now there's a move towards accepting all of the different world traditions, the traditions of India, China, Japan, of the Middle East. So it's like Srila Prabhupada's really up to date. It's really cutting edge, and now there are thousands of conferences, thousands of world conferences being held. Every day in the world, there's hundreds of conferences on many different topics, on history, philosophy, medicine, engineering, agriculture, sport. And so it's, we can think about if we have any expertise or any experience in any of those fields, we can think, is there some way in which we can present some of Srila Prabhupada's writings at these conferences? It may not be a big conference, may not be an international conference, but just some event. Yes, just some event where we can somehow present Srila Prabhupada's teachings. Book distribution is an eternal activity. The Vedas are eternal. This is a difficult thing to get your head around when you've been educated in the West. But the Vedas are eternal, existing eternally, and they're received by pure devotees who enter into a trance, and they receive that knowledge in a trance-like state, and actually all of the Vedas and the Upanishads, as we have them now, were received in that way in the present day of Lord Brahma. But the Vedas were existing in the previous day of Lord Brahma. In fact, the Vedas exist even when Lord Brahma is in slumber, even when the universe is in complete a stage of annihilation. The Vedas still exist at that time. And Srila Vyasadeva also received the teachings of the Srimad Bhagavatam in meditation. He also gained the knowledge in that way. So the reason I'm saying this is that whether we're engaged in distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, talking about Srila Prabhupada's books, or whether we're engaged in other services which facilitate the distribution of the Srimad Bhagavatam and Srila Prabhupada's books, and we're always engaged in book distribution, because we're always in the association of the Vedas. They're there constantly, and when we're in the right state of mind, when we're actually performing our sadhana correctly, then we're actually receiving the knowledge of the Vedas even without our knowing it. We're being nourished by the Vedic knowledge constantly. And so Yeah, so that's really what I wanted to say, and thank you very much for attending the class. And there's a wonderful website called Book Distribution, and it's created and maintained by Vijay Prabhu, who is the BBT Minister for Book Distribution. And every day, if you subscribe to this website, then you receive stories from all over the world from devotees who have written books. So although we're in lockdown in the UK and it's very difficult to distribute books in certain parts of the world, that is still possible. And in Los Angeles Temple, which is actually one of the best temples in the world for book distribution, they're actually having their best year this year. And there are many other temples which are having their best years. So we don't need to feel that we're not doing as well as they are. We don't need to feel guilty for not doing anything. We're all part of the same team. They're all disciples of Srila Prabhupada and disciples of Srila Prabhupada's disciples. And Vijay Prabhu, he actually he maintains this website and sends out daily updates just to keep us all together as Srila Prabhupada's book distributors. It's just as Vasi Prabhu wrote this book called Our Family Business. Srila Prabhupada said that book distribution is our family business. So at certain times, certain members of the family are not able to do the family business. They have to go and do other things. They have to look after their health, or they may be in some financial crisis. So they're not able to be active members of that family business. But still, they want to get letters. They want to hear about it. So I really recommend that you actually subscribe to this website. And every month you also get the World Sankirtan newsletter, which is really amazing because it divides all of the different book distribution centers into different categories. And one category is Srila Prabhupada's disciples, who are all now over 65 years old. And several of them are still going out every day distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. And one of them actually beat her own record last month. She's been distributing books for 50 years, and she beat her own record. That's Nidra Devi Dasi from Denver. And not only are we connected to all of those devotees around the world that were distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, but we're also connected to the book distributors here on the altar, like the Goswamis, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and not illustrated here, but definitely part of our Guru Parampara, Narottam Das Thakur Srinivas and Ramachandra Das Kaviraj. And actually recently, the Bhaktivedanta Archives have discovered a document which is the book scores of Narottam Das Thakur Srinivasacharya and Ramachandra Kaviraj, because they had to submit their book scores to Jiva Goswami twice a year or something like that. And it's actually got it written down, like 5 nectars of 5 Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, 6 Chaitanya Bhagavats, 3 Padyavalis, and it's actually it's literally written down like that. So it's like we're part of an amazing book distribution team, which has its and our mentors are like eternally liberated souls in the spiritual world, but still they're enthused by sending in reports to their guru of how many books they're doing. So whatever little we can do, like it's nice we have the temple updates. So let's try to for the next temple update, let's try to have distributed some of Srila Prabhupada's books online, or in some way made some contribution to the distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books. It may seem more difficult, but actually at this time, with a lot of people being at home, then they've definitely got more time to read the books, and probably more time to actually digest them as well. So stop that. And if anyone has any questions, they can ask me later. Grant Rosh and the Bhagavatam Ki. Prihatmidanga Transcendental Book Distribution Ki. Srila Prabhupada's Transcendental Book Distribution Family Ki. Nitai Gaur Premanand.
This place, the Vasi Priya.
Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki.